Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today we're back with another build video for TU10. I teased that this might be coming last week, and I'm very excited to finally be showing it off in its full glory. This is my Eclipse Protocol build. If you didn't see it, I did a video just after TU10 dropped, praising the set for how crazy strong it can be in certain situations and scenarios, but I made pretty clear that it wasn't a full build video yet because the update had just dropped, and I didn't have nearly all the pieces and roles that I wanted, and I was still tuning things around. Well, I can say now that I've pretty squarely landed on where I want the build to be at, and I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. This thing is monstrous in both PVE and PvP, given you use it in the right scenarios. This isn't your throw-on for anything type of build. You need to know when to use this thing and how to use it effectively, and if you can pull that off, then you're going to get some incredible returns. But don't worry, we'll cover all of that. Without any further ado, let's just get right into it. So getting right to it, let's just start with what I'm sure everyone is going to tell me about, and that's that I shouldn't be using the Airburst Seeker Mine. I'll tell you what, I think this thing is pretty underrated because while it does have some janky targeting and it has a lower performance rate over some of the other burn skills, it's because it has such a high burn duration. 31.2 seconds is what I have it up to on this setup, compared to something like the Firestarter Chem Launcher, where your duration is only 12.5. This thing is almost triple that amount. And while the burn damage on the Firestarter is 234, and on the Seeker Mine it's 246, so it's doing more damage over a much longer duration of time. And so yes, you are going to miss sometimes with that targeting, that's just going to happen. But in my opinion, it's worth it for that extra duration, because when I use this chest piece specifically, I get that refresh duration up to 75% of the total amount. And so it's going to be, what, a little over 20 seconds when it applies to the next target, which is how this gear set works. I'll get to that in just a second. So in my opinion, the Airburst is my go-to choice, but of course you can use whatever you want. You can, of course, use the Burn Sticky Bomb or the Firestarter, like I was saying, or the turret, although that thing really sucks. Just because of its how you can turn on off, it's kind of weird in my opinion. But of course you can use any of these, and as soon as you get the kill, it's going to spread it. It's going to do a lot of damage regardless. You just might have to do some more input on your end with your gun to make sure you get those kills once it spreads, because that duration is going to be a lot less than if you are using the Airburst Seeker Mine, where you get that 31.2 seconds. So that's why I'm using that. Just wanted to explain that off the bat. But yes, this is what I'm using, and my mods in there, I just have 2 damage mods. I don't have anything good in this slot yet. Actually, I have a health one that I'll put on, but not like that really matters. No one's going to shoot it down. And beyond that, I do have another way to apply a burn. We'll get to my specialization just after I go over my secondary skill, which is the Shock Trap. And I do really like using this specifically in PvE. Now, I would like using it in PvP, but the problem is there's currently a bug with it where it can shock both you and your teammates. I don't know if it's intended or not to shock yourself, because it could be something that's intended where it's a hazard. If you get too close, you shock yourself. That happens with other stuff with burn. So that could be intended for yourself, but it should not be shocking your teammates. And I confirmed this with Bruce on Twitter. He told me that it shouldn't be shocking your teammates, and so they are looking into it. But at the moment, if you take this into the Dark Zone, you are putting your team at a liability for shocking them in the middle of a fight, and obviously that's not good. You're going to get put down pretty quickly if you shock yourself or your teammates. So be warned, if you try and use the Shock Trap, it's probably going to harm you rather than help you. But in PvE, where it doesn't matter as much if you get shocked and you can put some more distance between where you put it down, this thing is really nice and I really enjoy using it. It locks them down and makes your success rate with hitting them with the Airburst Seeker Mine a lot higher. That's one reason why I like using it, and it's just really nice to be able to get some damage in with your gun without having to, move around too much. It's just nice. I like it. You can of course use something else like the Stinger Hive or whatever other stat effect you want to apply, but I like using this. I think you should try it out if you haven't yet. Now in PvP, what you should use for your secondary skill, in my opinion, is the Stinger Hive. You're going to get a nice extra status on top of the burn. You can apply bleed to them too, which on my setup does 13k a second, almost 14k. So it's pretty nice. It's not going to do as much as the burn, and it doesn't disable their ADSing, but it just adds an extra tick onto that along with the burn and the vial, which we'll get to later. And so it just, combines with everything else to apply as much damage over time as possible, so you can get people down and start spreading around these status effects. Now, before I move on to the guns and the gear, let's talk about the specialization. I'm using the Firewall, and I really enjoy how this fits in with the build. Now, you have options. You can definitely use the Technician, because this will give you the extra skill tier along with skill damage if you spec into that. But the reason why I've enjoyed using the Firewall so much is because, A, the primary reason is you get 20% burn duration, which just helps buff up that amount on your Airburst if you are using that by so much. Gets it up to, on this setup, I have 31.2. I've seen other people get into the high 20s, but with this setup, with using Firewall and all these stat effects I've rolled, I can get it above 30 seconds, which is just super nice. That's my favorite part about it, is how long this lasts. And so getting the Firewall, then I get that extra 20%, and it's just a very nice bonus. On top of that, in PvE, you get another source to be able to apply burn, and that's obviously with the Flamethrower. And it does a lot of burn damage. You'll see it in some of the gameplay at the end. I use it, and it does a lot of damage, and you're going to be able to spread around with this as well if your Secret Mine is on cooldown, or if the enemies are really close range. This is a very good option and a secondary use for the burn to get that on the enemy. So I really enjoy using Firewall. Obviously the medkit is better than with the Technician one, and you get some other nice perks like when your armor is broken, you spread the fire around. If you're in PvE or PvP, that's going to help a lot with how this gear set works and just statuses in general, since that's what you're specking into. So I think this is a really nice choice, and I would recommend this personally, but of course you can use Technician if you would rather get that extra skill tier so you can roll an armor roll or whatever, but this is what I've chosen for this setup. Alright, let's move on to my guns and my gear. For my primary, I am using the Pyromaniac. If you watch my video talking about Eclipse Protocol the other week, I was using the Chameleon on that setup, but someone in the comments did recommend the Pyromaniac. I had on my mind, but I hadn't tried it out a ton, and I hadn't really considered how much you can really do with this, because you get Perfectly Ignited, which is deal 25% damage to burning enemies, and after 3 kills you apply burn to the next enemy you hit, which is obviously very good on a build that's focused on burning people, so it just allows you to have a lot more base damage up front. What it does mean, and I will talk about this kind of at the end of my portion of going over the build, is that it does hinder your ability to take down heavies specifically. I was having a hard time once I switched to this taking them down as effectively, because the big reason I was using the Chameleon is that in, heroic content, in missions, and, control points, whatever, whenever you get a heavy, you're going to have a hard time because they're not affected by stat effects in general. I mean, you can light them on fire, but that does nothing. You can shock them, which does immobilize them, and then you can hit them with your gun. But the whole reason why I was using the Chameleon originally is because once they get shocked, you can then, shoot them in the legs, get that reload buff, and then just lay into their chest or the head if you want to get that too, and then get them down pretty quickly while they're still trying to progress through your shock trap. But with the Pyromaniac and without the Chameleon, you just have a lot less of that insane, high proccing damage. You're going to have good damage in general. If you light them on fire, you're going to get that 25% and plus the backpack, which we'll get to in a second, but you're just going to have a harder time in general. So be aware if you do want to use the Pyromaniac for that. But in PvP specifically, the Pyromaniac is definitely a better option than the Chameleon, and you'll get some really nice gun damage even though you're not spec'd into weapon damage anywhere on the build. The Pyromaniac will allow you to get some really nice damage once you set them on fire, so that is my primary. For my secondary, this does help with what I was just talking about. The Diamondback I think is a really nice option because you can get those guaranteed critical hits, and I'm not spec'd into crit at all in this build, but I am getting 74.8% crit damage, so when you get those guaranteed crits after you hit the mark with the Diamondback, you're going to be getting some decent gun damage, and so it's a really nice option to be able to take down, heavies or some ads that are just wandering around that haven't been lit up by your fire or whatever. I think it's a nice option. You can of course use whatever you want for your secondary, but I think this is a nice choice, and you might want to try it out if you're lacking a bit in the damage department or need help taking down heavies or dogs or whatever. And then for my sidearm, I just have the Orbit like pretty much on every other build with Perfect Finisher. It's a pretty nice option and would also help you out with the Diamondback and Pyromaniac's damage if you needed that too. Alright, now let's talk about the gear. Hopefully no one came to this video trying to find out what the gear set was, then I had to wait all this time, but the 2-piece of Eclipse Protocol is 15% stat specs, obviously very good considering that's what we're specking into. The 3-piece is 15% skill haste and 30% hazard protection, which is a really nice bonus. With that, and on the vial it comes with hazard and the 10% I have for my watch, then I'm getting 50% hazard protection just from running this gear set, and so that's really handy. It helps if you accidentally light yourself on fire, although the Secret Mine will kind of kill you at this amount of armor if it hits you, so that's something to be aware of. But in general, it's just really nice to have hazard. It could be really good for the upcoming Operation Iron Horse. I'm definitely planning on having this build as an option to use during the raid if such an encounter would call for it, but just in general, hazard is nice to have, and so getting a free 50% if you have the same setup as me, it's just really nice to have. And then the 4-piece is indirect transmission. Your stat effects now spread on kill to all enemies within 15 meters and refresh for 50% of the duration. And then since we're using the chest piece here, we have Proliferation, the amplification talent, which increases direct transmission range from 15 to 20 meters and refresh percentage from 50 to 75%. I think if you're going for the same setup as me with the Airburst Secret Mine and that super long burn duration, Proliferation and the chest piece in general is a must run. You want to get this talent because it's just, it buffs up everything that the build is about, and it's going to make you that much more effective. So definitely run that if you want to get the most out of this possible. Let's backtrack and start at the mask so I can then go through the rest of the gear and show you guys all the rolls. I do have the new Vile Exotic. Now this is from the latter end of the Season 2 reward track at rank 90. If you need help leveling up through those, Wids made a really good guide on it. Basically just set your reward difficulty as high as you can handle and turn on as many directives as you like, and then go and do resource convoys in the open world. I did that for about, I don't know, a total of 6 or 7 hours, I want to say, and I was at rank 100. So it's a very effective method, and it'll get you this mask if you really need it. If you don't have the vial and you don't have the time to farm for all that, I would recommend either a Golem or a Wyvern mask. That'll give you either status effects or skill damage, and that'll just help you out with, again, everything that this build is about. But for what the vial does, if anyone doesn't know, is its talent is Toxic Delivery. Status effects also apply damage over time debuff for 10 seconds. Total damage dealt is equal to 20% of your concussion grenade damage and increased by your status effect attribute. So basically, anytime you apply a burn or a shock or a bleed or any status effect, then it's going to also give them a debuff, which is noted above their head with a red symbol, the same symbol on the talent there, and it's just going to do extra damage that's, flat. It's not another status effect per se, it's just a debuff that's giving them flat damage over time alongside your other status effects. So this is really nice in both PvE and PvP just to get that extra tick going. If you use this with the Stinger Hive, then you have technically three ticks at the same time going on one target. It's going to do an insane amount of damage. So I definitely recommend the vial if you have it, and I would go out and farm it just to put it on this because it's really just that worth, trust me. The rolls I have here are 1 skill tier, maxed out status effects, and 9.5 hazard protection. Again, that's how I'm getting to 50%, and I just have a skill haste mod on there. For the chest piece, I have a skill tier, maxed out status effects, and another skill haste mod. You want to get skill haste mods on all 3 of your slots so that airburst can get as quick of a cooldown as possible. Even if you're using like the fire starter, I'd probably recommend that too. It's just a really nice option to have over the other choices for skill mods on there. And then for the holster, 1-piece Handy U. Now you can definitely use Golem or Wyvern instead of this if you want. I like the extra skill haste just so I can get the Secret Mine back as quick as possible, considering it only has 1 charge, but that's really up to you. If you want to do more damage over that skill haste, you can certainly do that as well. I have 1 skill tier, maxed out skill haste and status effects. Again, you could also put skill damage for that skill haste if you'd rather have that as well, but I just like to run it like this, considering I just have the 1 charge Airburst Secret Mine. But if you do have a fire starter, you might not care since you have 8 charges. You could then do, Golem and roll skill damage there just to get some more damage out of it. Really up to you on that one. Moving on to the backpack, I have the Eclipse backpack for 1 skill tier, maxed out status effects, another skill haste mod, and the talent Symptom Aggravator amplifies all damage you deal to status affected targets by 15%. Now, when I made my video on Eclipse last week, I did say that I was trying to maybe get a setup going with the Anarchist Cookbook for Perfectly Wicked, but what someone did point out to me in the comments, which I very much appreciate, thank you for saying this, is that Symptom Aggravator is a multiplicative bonus, whereas Wicked is an additive one. So you're actually getting more worth out of this, and when you combine that with the Pyromaniac, this is one of the reasons why I chose to go with that over the Chameleon. You're just getting insane damage when you're shooting someone that's burning. You're getting the 25% from the Pyromaniac, and then 15 from this, and it's multiplicative. You're just getting a ton of gun damage that you haven't needed to spec into. It's a really nice option. So I recommend this, but you could of course run either Wicked or even something like Galvanize if you want to help out your team a bit. There's a lot of choices here. I would recommend this personally, but try out whatever you like. And then the gloves are also Eclipse for skill tier and status effects, and the knee pads are skill tier and status effects. So yeah guys, this is my new go-to skill and status build for a TU10 using the new Eclipse gear set. It's pretty funny because when I first saw this thing on the PTS, I kind of disregarded it and figured I wouldn't use it much, but it's turned out to be one of my faves. This thing is pretty crazy. I'm going to play some more gameplay after this, but before that, I did want to cover 2 areas where I feel this build isn't as applicable or where it has some weaknesses. One of those is solo PvP. I think in a group where you have some others to take the front line and the attention so that you can get your skills targeted well from the back, it works fantastic, but solo, it can be a bit rough, at least from my experience. Additionally, this thing does have a bit of a hard time against the Black Tusk. This is because they're various electronics and robotics, and this has very little tools to attack and counter those. Support stations, dogs, heavies, all are relatively unaffected by statuses, and so you have to rely on your gun, which doesn't deal much damage to all non-status affected enemies, so it does get you at a larger disadvantage. So I might recommend a more gun-focused damage build for Black Tusk encounters, but yeah, I just wanted to point that out for transparency's sake. This set and build overall can be incredibly powerful in PvE and PvP. You just have to know where and when to use it to get the most benefit. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. Let me know your thoughts and experiences with this set in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about my rather controversial choice to use the Airburst over any other burn skills. I'm expecting at least some people to get upset about it for no reason, but hey, that's the name of the game around here, so it's all good. Enjoy the footage, everyone. Stay safe out there. Have a great day, and until the next one, guys, RogueGold out.
Stinger Hive detected. Rogue agent eliminated. Rogue agent neutralized. contaminated gear detected. Landmark engaged. Vital signs critical.
We're at close quarters! Oh shit! This one's fine! Flash him out of cover!
Immediate medical assistance needed. Vital signs critical.